Hello, my name is Jameson Officer-Thurston. I am a senior here at Doane University. I am a graphic design major, and I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. Today, I'll be doing the showing of my project, Black Figures in History. This project started as an educational, almost educational awareness project, showing light on unknown or lesser known black figures in history. That's why I got the name. It was kind of a way to show kids that were like me growing up that when all they were learning about in school was civil rights leaders or athletes who were like famous and contributed something to society, that there's more than just that that they can do in their life. So this is kind of how that project came about. Many of the people that I chose to do were inventors or entrepreneurs, and it's just to show that these kids have a different avenue other than being a civil rights leader or an athlete when they grow up. Not that any of that is bad, but that's really all that was shown to me when I was in school, and so I wanted to shed light on those who are successful African Americans that are doing something other than that. So the reason that this project is important to me is because both of my parents were educators. So education has always been at the forefront of everything that I do. And it just felt right to have this project be meant to educate someone, or specifically children growing up in a public school or a private school, to really just gain more knowledge about these under-acknowledged black figures. So the reason that I did this project and the way that I did it was because I wanted to show children that look like me, essentially, that they can do whatever they want to do in their life, opening up different avenues of, I guess, job opportunities, but more of like careers that they could do instead of being an civil rights activist or an athlete. Because I feel like in terms of like learning about Caucasian historical figures, there's a wide array of what they can do and what they've achieved and everything that encompasses with that. And so I wanted to make that experience the same for children that look like me, so that they can see that they can do anything that they want to in their life. And that's what this project is hopefully going to accomplish, is by showing these kids that there's this wide array of careers that they can choose from, or things that they could be great at that they might not have thought about before. And that's essentially why I have done this project in the way that I have done it. So the intended audience of this project, I wanted to be younger African American children, specifically in elementary school, grade school type, just because I felt like it was appropriate to start teaching them about these different avenues that they could be taking, specifically because when I was a child that I was learning about African American figures at that age. But again, it was only ever civil rights activists or athletes. So I wanted to open it up to a range of different things that these kids could be doing. And I felt like aiming it towards these younger kids was the most appropriate, because this is when they're in the time of learning about these certain figures and significant figures in African American history. I'd also like to thank Professor Marilyn Johnson Farr, as she was the leading force in the educational part of this project. She helped with the selection of some figures and reviewed some of the components of this project to make sure that they were well suited for children and the educational part of the whole process. So I'd like to say thank you again for all the help there. For my project, I chose 7 individuals with the help of Marilyn Johnson Farr. For each individual, I made an animation, a poster, and then compiled that information into a final book. So the first one I want to talk about is Madam C.J. Walker, and she was actually the first African American millionaire. the way that she basically acquired her wealth was through hair growth products, because she herself experienced hair loss. And so through experimentation, she found a product that worked for her and other African American women. That's who she specifically marketed towards. But she acquired her wealth through making hair products, which I think is really cool because I use hair products all the time. Another one is Lonnie Johnson. He was a scientist for NASA, and he was actually, he worked on inventions on the side while working for NASA, and specifically the one that I am talking about is his invention of the Super Soaker, which I think is great for kids. I think it's a great way to get them into the world of inventing through a toy. But it's funny because it was invented on accident, basically. And so he was in the development stages of a water pump that would use water instead of Freon to be sort of a cooling agent. And so he accidentally invented this Super Soaker through his testing of this water pump that he was trying to develop. The next person I want to talk about is Katherine Johnson. She was a mathematician for NASA, and the thing that she did was she was very important to the actual calculations of getting the Apollo 13 mission, like the actual rocket itself, into orbit and eventually landing on the moon. And so her calculations were very important to that mission, and she was a significant role in the actual landing and flying of the rocket, at least getting it into orbit. So that's what she had accomplished. The next person I want to talk about is Garrett Morgan. He was an inventor through and through, and the thing that he had invented was the first iteration of the stoplight, which is very important to everyone today. The way that he kind of developed it was he was driving in his car in Cleveland, Ohio, and he came to a troublesome intersection where he had seen an accident. And so he started thinking of ways that he could prevent further accidents from happening, which he eventually led to this device that would give drivers a warning to stop and allow other drivers to pass. So that's kind of how the stoplight came to be. The next person I want to recognize is Mary Edmonia Lewis. She was the first recognized African-American sculptress, and she spent some time in Ohio at Oberlin College studying, and then eventually moved to Massachusetts, where she developed an appreciation for the fine arts after looking at a sculpture of Benjamin Franklin. After some time in Boston, she moved to Rome, where she had mastered the art of sculpting and had been learning from other sculptors. And then she had moved back to the United States and had many different recognized sculptures that she had done. The next person I want to recognize is Louis Vladimir. He was a draftsman by trade, which meant that he did the drawings for many different inventions that people had him draft up. And so eventually he started to work with Thomas Edison, the inventor of the first iteration of the light bulb. The only problem with the first iteration of the light bulb was that they were very expensive and they were not very long lasting. Vladimir noticed this, and he wanted to create a longer lasting and cheaper filament, just a little part inside of the light bulb that actually produced the light. He wanted to make a new version of this so that the light bulbs themselves were very cost effective and were better utilized and could be utilized in more spaces. So that was his contribution towards the light bulb. The final person that I would like to acknowledge is George Crumb. He was a chef at Moon's Lake House in New York, a restaurant in New York. And as the story goes, he was working one day and a customer had sent back a basket of fries that he deemed were too soggy and not crispy enough. In order to spite the customer, George Crumb decided to make a new batch of fries, but cut them paper thin and fry them to a crisp. He also had salted them pretty aggressively. And so he sent back these new fries, and to his surprise, the customer had sent back an empty basket with a note that said that the fries were great. And this is kind of the first instance of the making of potato chips, and that is what he is known for. Garrett Morgan, an inventor, was the first African-American man to own a car in Cleveland, Ohio. One day, Morgan was driving and witnessed a car accident at an intersection. After seeing this, he made a stoplight with a warning to alert drivers to stop. Morgan then sold his idea to the General Electric Company, making a beginning version of the stoplight we know today. Katherine Johnson was an African-American physicist and mathematician that worked for NASA's Apollo program in the 1960s. Johnson's calculations were very important to the success of getting astronauts into orbit and eventually the moon. According to legend, George Crumb, an African-American chef, worked for the restaurant Moon's Lake House in the 1850s. The story told is that one day a picky customer had sent back an order of french fries for being too thick. To get back at the customer, Crumb had cut potatoes paper thin and fried them to a crisp. He had also salted them, perhaps a bit too much. When Crumb sent out the chips, the customer had loved them. This is what led to the popularity of potato chips. Madam C.J. Walker was the first African-American woman millionaire in America. Walker's success came from a problem that she had experienced in her own life. Walker struggled with hair loss and developed the Walker system as a result. This changed the black hair care community. Walker ended up employing over 3,000 individuals who sold her products door to door, enabling her to become a millionaire. In 1979, Lonnie Johnson was working for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Johnson was playing with the idea of an environmentally friendly heat pump that used water instead of Freon. One night, Johnson had tested his pump in his bathroom tub, where the pump blasted a stream of powerful water. This was the birth of what we know today as a super soaker water gun. Mary Edmonia Lewis was the first recognized African-American sculptor. She studied at Oberlin College in Ohio and eventually moved to Boston, Massachusetts, where she developed an appreciation for the fine arts. She had traveled to Rome after some time in Boston to master the art of sculpting. Lewis's works consist of famous anti-slavery heroes and figure sculptures from her Native American heritage. Vladimir was an inventor and engineer who worked closely with the creator of the light bulb, Thomas Edison. At the time, light bulbs were very expensive to make and only lasted a few days, meaning they had to be replaced often. Vladimir had developed a new process for making a longer-lasting light bulb. This made light bulbs not only more efficient, but also cheaper and accessible. My hope for this project is that teachers will be able to use the animations that I've created as learning tools or resources in the classroom during the academic school year. I've made a YouTube channel for these videos so that they're easily accessible, but if there is no internet, I've also made a book that students will be able to use or purchase, like teachers, schools will be able to purchase these and use them as resources as well. So, my goals for post-graduation are to move back to Omaha and work as an in-house graphic designer. From there, I hope to gain experience and move to the Pacific Northwest. The graphic design industry there is producing a lot of really good work, and I hope to someday be a part of that same community. Did I accomplish my goals for this project? I believe so. I made a lot of really good educational pieces for my target audience. I think that was the most important. Part to me, was to make something that felt like a kid was going to watch it on YouTube. Like that was the main goal for me, was to create something that felt real enough that a child was going to watch it and learn something. So why was Martin Luther King not in my project of historical black figures? Well, there's a very simple answer to that, and it's because you already know of him. The entire point of this project was to bring to light those who had made a significant contribution to society that were underacknowledged or just unknown. How did I land on the art style that I chose? So a lot of the research that I did for my project was going through and looking at what kids are watching, what they're looking at, and a lot of what I was seeing was simplistic, rudimentary shapes. And so that was kind of how the art style came about, and it shows through the figures that I made, through the posters that I have, even the colors themselves, having a very colorful, bright, almost fun aesthetic to a lot of what I was making, is how all of that came together. I'd like to thank everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed my project as much as I did making it. If you would like to see more work from me that I produced at Doane, my website is jamesonotdesign.com.